Okay, looks like we got quorum for today, so we'll have our semi-annual meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. And hopefully we can get our business taken care of and get out of here as short as we can. I'd like to start off with the treasurer's report. Okay.
So as a note, I don't think we have to vote on this at the semi-annual, but I did kind of go over anything. Everybody should have this in their packets. Get to my notes. So year to date so far, we have taken in income from all funds of $141,000, just over that. About $101,000 of that is from the general fund, so the general offering, other sources like that. Currently, on the asset side of the balance sheet, we have $261,000. Liabilities, we just have small payroll tax liability of $868 at the end of June. And to be clear, all this is through the end of June, from January 1st to the end of June. Fund balances, you guys can all see there. You can see the receipts down at the bottom, what we've taken in. General fund, again, took in that $100,000. The rest of that from up above comes from the building fund, which took in over $9,000. Memorial fund took in $6,000 this year. Partners for Food took in $25,000. And then the disbursement side of that, and we'll get over to that on the expense side, but most of our expenses come out of that general fund there. Memorial Fund has paid out roughly $6,000, which is about what it took in this year. Partners for Food had disbursements of a little over $30,000. The ending column there shows all the ending balances and all those funds. So that is the left side of the balance sheet and the income. On the right side, we have the budgeted disbursements versus the actual. You can see the percentages in that third column, which show where we are year to date versus what we had budgeted. I will let you guys look through all that. Just a couple things of note. Overall, we're pretty close, running fairly close to budget, which we would be halfway through the year. We're very close to, I think, what we budget on most items. You can see most of those are running 50%, which means we are right on budget for those particular items. Anything below 50% means we're under budget. Anything above it means we're a little over budget for what we expected for this point in the year. So I will let you guys look over all that. There's a few outliers, but nothing too major. Does anyone have questions on any of those items or anything before? Like I said, I don't think we need to vote on this. This is just kind of a midway review through the year. So, all right, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Now we're going to go on to a mental health initiative update. I think that's Pastor Jeff. Where'd he go? He's out in the foyer? Okay, we'll skip on to the next thing then. Okay, Lauren's got it? Great.
We're just going to ad-lib this. We are approaching having our first draft put together for the not the application, but the submission of the activities and how we're proposing to use our funding for the mental health initiative. So we've been meeting regularly since early May, and we have another meeting this week. So the committee is listed. Actually, I think the summary that's been put together is going to be in the Voice of Zion. And so you can see all the committee members listed there. But we will be sharing more information as we work through the Center for Congregations, as that first draft is officially due in mid-September from that group. And we will be running events that are approved and proposed through that process in 2025. So the actual process does not begin until next year, but we're in the middle of those preparations, and it's been a really well-functioning group. So we appreciate everyone's support in the survey, and we'll have more to share as our first draft comes together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to the Cemetery Committee report. That'd be Mr. Larry Greggy.
Thank you, Bobby. Good morning, and thank you all for spending part of your day to help us do the business of the Zion Cemetery. We also stand in order, in alignment with the call to order by Bobby. Make this as short as I can. We got 3 items. I need to share with you some updates on our fencing project and hope to get approval to move forward, as well as an additional project that involves some fencing down on the old cemetery. We need to elect a new officer in our group, and I'll need your vote for that. And that will just about cover it. To speed things up, we're going to forego the secretary's report. Those are in your written report. Please take note of that. I'll ask Russell to come up and give a financial and results of an audit. One correction in your written report, and I didn't realize that I had this omission until the report was printed. In the list of people that were buried in our cemetery from 23 to 24, I omitted Alice Garness from that list. So with Alice passed away in July 29th of 2023, and I omitted her from that list. So it's Alice, Craig Keeber, who's non-member, Lillian Randall, member, and Don Haynert, member. So those are the persons that we opened graves up for in the last fiscal year. So please make note of that in your written report. I will ask Russell Rayer to come forward and share with you our financial records for the year.
Thanks. I'll be referring to the page 6 in your handout. So the cemetery report for this last year, I want to thank Donna Hardick for actually reviewing everything, and she has indicated that everything is accurate in regards to the financials you see here this year. You can see our beginning balance and our ending balance. We've done fairly well this year with interest rates being up, and part of our investments are in the stock market. So it has gained about $31,000 over the year. And for expense, we did seal the drives last year in the cemetery, so we had $1,725 in regards to that expense. Unless somebody else has any other questions, I'll be glad to answer. You kind of look at the statement here and see if you have any other questions. If not, that's it.
Thank you, Russ. Approve as submitted. Under old business, the only thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit this morning is our projects involving the cemetery fencing. I think we discussed those at our annual meeting, or some annual meeting last year briefly. Wanted to update you on that project, as well as maybe get a consensus to move forward in the form of a motion. So let me break down real briefly the scope. The scope involves installing fencing on the south perimeter of our new cemetery. Scope 2 of the project also involves installing a fencing section on the south side of our old cemetery, kind of on the south side of our old cemetery, to separate the parking lot by the ball diamond from the cemetery. I think it's a much needed, we've talked about it for several years, but we're going to include that project with our new cemetery fencing on the south side also. Gotten 3 quotes on the cemetery fencing pricing, so we're pretty confident in the prices that we've got. I hope you've all had a chance to maybe take a look. I put a 6-foot section of fencing out on the new cemetery with an ideal of kind of a concept. We're going to change the landscape rock. We're going to update the retaining wall that's in front of the cemetery on our new cemetery a little bit. So that project includes all 3 of those things. One change that we may have to make, I've got a lot of compliments on the styles of the fencing. We're going to use a spear top, a black fence. The fencing that you see outside the church is called a concave, or I call it a sunset style, where there's actually a sweeping curve on the fencing. And I've gotten a lot of compliments, and I like that design myself. One thing that was brought up, though, is you have to have even 6-foot increments on your openings on your fence to be able to make those look attractive. And we don't have that very well on the backside because of the roadways on our new cemetery. What happens then, you end up with half of a sunset, your dip will stop depending on the width. The fence sections are 6 foot. So that may end up being a spear top fence, a 4-foot fence on the backside, but it will be a level top, which I hope that's not something that's gonna cause an issue with anybody, but fence will look pretty much the same. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that. The fence down on the south side of the old cemetery will just be a 4-foot straight fence, similar, identical to the one that we put on the new cemetery. So if there's questions, or I would definitely entertain motions to move forward. Jim? Thank you. Second, Terry? Thank you. Motion by Jim Donner, seconded by Terry Schrader. I think we can do this with a show of hands, I hope, and we're talking about both projects. Let me mention before we vote, the cemetery fencing on the old cemetery is primarily going to be funded through memorial monies and through, I think there were some endowment monies that were approved some time ago for some fencing. Those of you that worked on replacing some stones on the old cemetery and straightening probably remember that, but there was, at that time, there was going to be a fence put down to kind of separate the parking. Yeah, Mom, or Ann. Mom? Okay, good point. And I think I've talked to some council members that have talked about that fencing again recently, and it has been approved, so. That sounds right, yeah, from endowment, yeah. Okay. I don't think that will quite cover it all, but I think I've heard there's some memorial monies that could be used for that. Okay, thanks. Ruth? Good point. I've got those wrote down. Thank you for asking. For the south side, and again, we've gotten 3 quotes. The quote is around $3,200 for the old cemetery, which is about 96 to 100 foot of fencing. What our plans are, the scope of the new cemetery is to replace the landscaping rock that is existing, and we're gonna use that landscaping rock down on the old cemetery next to the Ball Diamond, so we can utilize some of that. So that's the plans. On the new cemetery, this is a turnkey price if we have everything done by contractors. On the new cemetery, it's about $12,000, and that scope includes demolition of the existing hedges, putting rock down, putting landscape mat down, and of course, installing the new fence and then new wall caps on the retaining wall. Certainly, I think a lot of that this $12,000 can be minimized by doing some things ourselves. And I've heard a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of you out there that say, I've got a loader, I've got a tractor, I think a lot of that expense, probably $4,000, can be eliminated by us doing some labor ourselves. And that's kind of where my plan is. I just wanted to get a baseline if we didn't do any labor ourselves. It's probably about $12,000. Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, Irma? It's a good question, something we could think about, yeah. There'll be rock around it, so we won't need to mow up close to the fence, and the trimming will be a little more at ease, but that's a good point. We still have to protect our fence, I guess, too, yeah. Yeah. Good point. Question, any other? Good questions? At this time then, I'll ask for a show of hands, if I could, please. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Thank you all. Again, weather permitting, and it takes, I've heard from anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks on obtaining fencing, so depending on the availability and how long it takes to get. And we'll be in touch with how much we want to try to do ourselves. So thank you all for that. Any other old business that anybody needs to bring up at this time? Okay. New business. As is the case every year, we have an election of an officer, one of the 3 officers in our organization. So this year's, our cemetery secretary's term expired, so we will need to re-elect a new secretary. I've talked with Nancy Dugan, who has served faithfully for many years as our committee secretary, and she has agreed to take on that role again for another year. So, but at the same time, I would like to open the floor up for any nominations that may come from the floor for that position. She has done a great job, and Norman, I'll take that as a motion to close nominations, unless Irma, motion made by Norman Schrader, seconded by Irma Donner. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Nance, I don't see you. I know you're back there somewhere. There you are. Thank you again. Any other new business that needs to be brought up at this time? Just a few thank yous before I step down. We have a lot of unspoken help that helps with the cemetery all year, and those names, I couldn't begin probably to include everybody, but Tim and Kyle Haynard provide our grave opening services for us, and have done that for several years, so thank you guys for that. Donna Hardig has helped us out with audits and with, people sometimes don't realize that the documents, when you buy a gravesite, it's a legal document. Those have to be notarized, and it's actually a legal tender. So Nancy takes care of all that for us, and as well as Donna Hardig. So thank you for that, Donna. The person that did our mowing for years decided to pursue other things. Lee Coleman, thank you. Irma, you were a part of that. Your grandson Grant was a part of that. Thank you guys for what you did with helping keep our cemetery looking good. All those folks that trimmed hedges for years and raked rocks and treated moles, I appreciate your help all year. With that, this portion, the cemetery portion, is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, and the members of the cemetery committee for their work. It is appreciated. Now we'd like to go to the endowment report. Mr. Cook.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to announce that Endowment Fund Committee is now in its 34th year of operation, starting the end of July 2024. Our fiscal year was July 1st, 2023 through June 30th of 2024. The Endowment Fund had 11 associations or projects that it was able to help fund, with total disbursement of $25,950 for the year. The breakdown is on your endowment fund report. There were 2 positions to expire during our fiscal year, Tina Spears and Phil Wertz. Tina will be fulfilling her 2nd term, and Roger Radel will become a new member to endowment to fill the position for Phil Wertz. We want to thank Phil for all his work and dedication to endowment, as we look forward to having Roger join the committee. The position of council rep which was held by Bob Yunker till the end of last December, is now filled by Adam Kendall. We want to thank Bob for his work and dedication, and we look forward to working with Adam in the new year. The members for our current year are Tina Spears, Carol Embry, Gabe Schrader, Roger Radel, and myself, Dan Cook. Any questions, thoughts, or comments? With none being, I'm done.
Thank you, Dan. Next report we've got is on a solar project. Oh, Tina's got treasures? All right, sorry.
I can be really quick. Okay, so let's see, what page are we? 10. So page 10 shows the income statement. So along with what Russ had mentioned for the cemetery funds, it was a good year from interest. So we continue to have the portfolio at Fifth Third, but then we also have some separate monies and some certificate of deposits there at Banterra Bank, which you'll see at the top. But total income, the $35,291.79. Expenses for our fiscal year, the $5,280.79. So net income for the fiscal year of $30,011. Then you'll see the distribution portion at the bottom. It's basically just the summary to the pages that Dan had before that gave the paragraphs of the funds and who we supported throughout the fiscal year, but you'll see for the total distributions then of the $25,950 that he had mentioned before. Also of note, under the distribution portion, I know you've probably heard before we have our funds, the C2B1, B2, and B3, that I always kind of joke, the whole Star Wars, just, that's the family that grew up in, so I always wondered, like, what is all of that? So I tried to put just a little bit of an explanation. So B1, according to the bylaws, that's for local church and ongoing mission. So capital improvements, building programs, things like that, or what that fund, what we're looking to utilize those monies, and that's a fourth of the funds that we can use for C2B1. Half can go to C2B2, which you'll see is wider mission. So we're looking to obviously support those around us as well. And then the last C2B3, that's a fourth as well. And so that basically is the combination of 1 and 2, except we cannot use it for capital improvements or building. So just a short synopsis there to maybe help a little bit in understanding the differences between those 3 funds. Okay, so we'll go to the next page then, just shows a balance sheet for us. Whoa, sorry. So we keep things in cost value and market value, so you'll see the total assets underlined. If you come down a little bit, about middle of the page, you'll see the retained earnings numbers, and then the total liabilities and capital, again, in both cost value and market value. Then if you come to the bottom portion of the page, we're basically then showing again the same with the retained earnings numbers, but then giving some feel for the distributions per fund and how those looked, minus our reserve, which then gives you the ending balance at the bottom as well for the cash and market value. We did not have, at the end of June, any pending distributions. So questions for any of the treasurer's numbers or information? And Mr. Patrick was one of the ones, and thank you to him and Brian for conducting the audit. So if there aren't questions, I'll stay here just in case.
Are you good? Wait just a second for online. Okay. Hi, everybody. Brian Crace and I did the independent auditor's report for the endowment, and I will read that letter from you that was signed by both of us. The Council and Congregation of Zion Lippy United Church of Christ, we conducted a limited examination of the records of the treasurer of Zion Lippy UCC Endowment Fund for the period of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Examination consisted of the following: sample of cash receipts was compared to investment statements, sample of the expenses and distributions was compared to investment statements, actual distributions were compared to the approved amounts, the retained earnings detail of the balance sheet was verified against the current fiscal beginning year, matched the ending year from the prior year. The final investment statements were reconciled with the treasurer's records, verified the accuracy of the ending balance in the records. In our opinion, the treasurer's report as submitted to the council and congregation for the period of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024 accurately reflects the cash receipts and disbursements as recorded by the records of the treasurer. Long story short, everything Tina just said is good by us.
Okay, thank you, Tina and Pat. Now, if Carl and Pat want to come up, we're going to move on to the solar project and open the floor for that discussion. Any questions and things like that right now? Excuse me.
Remember, I can't hear them out there either, the mic, if you could repeat the question.
Right. Okay. So we're gonna, before we answer, we'll repeat the questions, just for online, so they can't hear the questions. Okay. Good to go. Hello again. All right. Before we get started, I did want to thank everybody who was on the solar committee. Got my list pulled up because there's actually quite a few people that were involved here. So we went through a decent long process here, kind of looking over all the options. It was a varied committee after our first informational lunch way back when that kind of stepped up to join the committee. There's a lot of different people with a lot of different both opinions and also skills, though. I also didn't know a lot of what the people on the committee could do and learned a lot of things about them, so it was a great experience for me. Just want to thank everybody on that. So that consisted of myself, Bob Yunker, Stacy Wagner, Russ Rare, Carl Barkett, Greg Schmidt, Tim Haynert, Dan Hoffman, and Jim Dregge. So thanks to everybody before we go any further. So our plan today, I did want to thank everybody for coming to the informational meeting last week. For those of you who weren't able to attend, I hope you're able to get on and find it online, review those details, get all that. What we've got today is a condensed version of a lot of that. Is basically what you guys are shown here in your packet. We're going to show that to you guys, kind of cover it, and then we'll open the floor for questions again. So anything that maybe didn't get answered last week or any new questions that have come up, we'll do that. The intention after that, the solar committee is going to provide its recommendation. Once we're done with our report, we'll provide a recommendation, then we'll take questions from you guys, is the intention of that. Subsequent to that, we will do a vote. As far as there will be 2 votes is what we determined probably the best course. There's going to be a vote whether or not we want to do solar, and then a vote on which option, if we want to do solar. Once that's all counted, we will decide which option we want to proceed forward with. That is going to be the structure of this. But first, we'll kind of go through our presentation, what we've got. If you want to bring it up, and this will correspond to your slides that are your pages that you guys have. I believe that's starting on page 12. Okay. As a reminder, the solar committee looked at various options for solar, what might work best for the church. What we ended on was we wanted to do a combined solar for church and the parsonage to cover the electric utilities primarily of the church and the parsonage. We originally received bids from 3 different bidders, or quotes from 3 different bidders on what they could do the project for. We trimmed this down to be purely what the church needed as opposed to providing excess, because we determined there wasn't a lot of value in providing excess electricity and feeding it back onto the grid. The return on investment really wasn't there. So we modified all those bids, sent a new one to them, and had them provide it for pretty much specifically the needs of the church. Not a lot of excess was built into this bid. So what you're seeing here is the different bids for what will be needed for the church's electric and what system would be needed for that, which was around 33.2 kilowatts. So this first slide covers the rooftop solar for the church and the parsonage. and that's with our two bidders. We got two bids back on that revised project, and that's what these costs represent. It starts with our kilowattage at the top of the 33.2, goes down to the estimated output, about 47,000 for each. They're very similar bids, I will say, until you get down to the cost side. Installed cost for the one was going to be 87,820. Installed cost for the other was 107,900 between the two bidders. The tax credits are down there on that next line under the credit side. And as a reminder for that, this is not actually tax credit. This comes back to us as a direct rebate. We pay for the full project, which will be the total cost. So it would be that 87,820 on the one side is what we would pay. After completing the project, we would submit a tax return, attach all the details for the project, and get our payment back of the rebate amounts, which is in red up there. So that is the structure of how that will function. So at the end of the day, between the two bids for the rooftop, the one side is $52,692. The other bidder total price after the rebates would be $64,740. At the bottom of this, we also put the roof replacement costs. So as a reminder for that, the Sunday school roof will have to be replaced sometime in the next 3 to 5 years, regardless of whether we do anything with this project. This was put in here just as an understanding. If we put it on the roof, we would also be replacing the roof before putting the solar on there. So that would be a separate cost. Any comments to that for Carl? No. Okay, can move on to the next one. The next one is the ground mount options. So, and as a reminder, that solar project, should have mentioned that, the roof side, that will purely be on the Sunday school roof. That is how that has been laid out by the bidders. Okay, that is where that location will be. From a ground mount standpoint, this bid included the location of down by the baseball field, kind of where the pumpkin patch is now. That general area is where this would be located. So for the ground mount option, it's a little bit more on the wattage side. Ultimately, these costs are higher. It's similar in cost to the rooftop, except for the fact that there's additional boring costs to get the electric from that location out to here. So that is what a lot of the additional cost relates to. You can see the numbers again in red for the credits. Those are obviously higher because it is based on the cost of the project. So that's what your credits end up being. In summary, the ground mount option for down by the baseball field for bidder one was going to be $68,100 after the rebates. Bidder two was going to be $86,400 after the rebates. Anything to add? Looks good. All right, next slide. All right, this third page is really just a comparison of the two, the rooftop versus the ground mount. Hopefully to give you guys a good summary of all that. It's pretty much just a summary of the two slides before. Nothing really new there. I should say there is a line for the estimated savings per year that is built into these, and that is based on the cost escalation of utilities, specifically for the electric, going up 2.5% a year. As Carl mentioned several times last week, you were very conservative with that. Most likely the utility costs are going to be a little higher than that, possibly 3.5%, somewhere in the range, but we wanted to go on the low end to really be conservative on like when our payback was going to be. There is that payback line that shows how long it will take to pay back the cost of the project based on that escalation of 2.5% a year and how much in savings is estimated based off of that. So as you can see, you know, the rooftop has a payback between 7 and 8.5 years, depending on the bidder we would go with. Ground mount has a payback between 9 and 11 years, depending on which project or which bidder we end up going with. Okay, next slide. So these last ones are really just a summary of everything I just talked about. It also provides additional details, such as what our current utility costs are and kind of how we got to those calculations on the previous slides. So the current electric usage is about $9,200 a year. Service charges, and we talked a lot about that last week. There were some questions on that because ultimately there's a number of different charges going to the church for the electric usage. Carl can probably explain a lot of that way better than I can. The payback period for this was designed to cover the the usage charges is what is covered in that, not the service charges, which I think won't change, but the demand charges might, but we're not sure of that. It's very difficult to determine how much that demand charge would change, so it is not built into the payback. We are purely looking at the usage charge. Is that accurate to say? So again, that next line talks about the escalation being about 2.5% a year on the cost. That line after that mentions if CenterPoint has been putting in new requests for increasing that even further, so you know that is built in on that next line. It will be even faster if CenterPoint does get approved to increase its rates as it keeps pushing for each year. So that that also talks about the amounts that increases by. So that last line is what I was just referring to. Only usage charges were considered when calculating the payback and the savings for moving to solar. Demand charges was very difficult to calculate, so we just removed it from the calculation. In theory, our payback should be faster because demand charges, in theory, should lower as well. Go to the next slide. So in summary here, and this, you can look back at your charts as well, the cost for adding solar will depend on which route we decide to go. If we decide to go that, it'll be the rooftop or the ground mount. Rooftop is less expensive, the ground mount is more expensive, but there are different considerations here and there. The lowest cost right now is the $53,000 for the rooftop, and that's after the rebates. The lowest cost for ground mount would be $68,000. Based on the option chosen, the payback will range from 7 to 11 years, depending on which route we go. Other key points, there are warranties on all of these. Whichever route we go, there are going to be warranties on these products. Warranty on the panels and inverters is 12 years, and the panels have a 25-year performance warranty, so they'll keep coming back to make sure they're performing up to standards. So we have up to that much in warranty for that. The life, I don't know if that's on the next slide. The life of the panels is anticipated to be, I believe it's 20 years. And so as you can tell, our payback, if we have even the highest payback is at 11 years, we would have another additional years beyond that to just achieve all the savings essentially at that point from beyond that. You miss anything on that? He just supported me a lot this week. He kept, it was all Carl last week, I felt like, so I'm just talking away. I think there's one more slide. If you can flip to that one. Okay, that's it. That last line does mentions the 20-year projected life. Savings would grow to $131,000 for rooftop and $97,000 for ground mount. If it does last that 20 years, that is the projected savings from each of those options. Okay, at this point, I will open up for questions. I will say we do have access to our slides from last week if anybody wanted to see some of those pieces or if we need to refer back to that. I'm sorry, before we do questions, I will provide the council's or the committee's recommendation. At this point, the committee is recommending two things. We do recommend that we move forward with the solar project, and if we do so, we should go with bidder one that has the lower costs. We've vetted them out as far as how reliable they are as well. They are reliable. There's different factors going into that cost, but we think that would be the best one to do it. So those are our recommendations. We determined not to recommend specifically the roof or ground because we think there's more to that. We want you guys to kind of decide on your own which route you want to go. So now I will open up for questions. So I'm going to repeat the question for online. The question is, how do you dispose of those panels after the 20 years? I don't know how much digging we did in that piece. Carl, do you have thoughts on that? I don't know that we as a committee looked into that disposal side of things, but it is a good point. I know there's costs to that. Stacy?
I can say there are strides being made in that in all renewable equipment, so they can be recycled. And we need to check with the installer what the process would be, but panels are recycled.
Okay, and I'll
almost everything that they're composed of can be recycled. So and I can provide you information on that.
Okay, I'll repeat that again for the benefit online. So most of the materials there, it sounds like can be recycled, and they are continuing to push towards making that more recyclable and to remove. So the idea would eventually be, yes, we would have to dispose of that. There are no costs built into this project relating to that disposal. So if there is disposal costs relating to that, that is not part of these numbers here. So that would be a separate thing within 20 years, I would say.
Part of the discussion we had yesterday, they will provide us with digital software that we will be able to monitor.
Oh, okay. I don't know if this was a question or a general point from outside maybe. We are able to monitor what we're getting back. So as far as knowing whether we're actually achieving what we should be achieving on that and if there's any issues, we are able to monitor any of these systems and see like by panel as well. It is pretty, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but you can do it by panel. So we will be able to monitor our savings. If there are any issues with the panels, we can monitor that and figure that out and get somebody out to fix it if that does come up. So just a side note as well. JJ?
Have you got an idea what the ongoing annual maintenance costs would be if there's battery plants in the
Quick couple questions there, and I'll ask the second one first because that's more on my mind here. But so the question was regarding the capacity of the inverters, regarding matching it up to the wattage of the array. You're saying we've got 33.2 being produced, but only 30 for the capacity. I'm not sure that's accurate, but I'll let Carl answer that. What was? Okay. Can you go back another couple slides? Okay, inverter capacity, AC total. Okay. Okay. Carl, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, the inverter capacity, typically, its size is a little bit smaller. And it has instantaneous capacity of more than that. It can handle the 34 kW. Actually, we went down, you can see that DC to AC ratio that was based on the sizing of the inverter compared to the wattage of the array. And you can see we're 1.12. They can actually go up to a 1.5 for between the inverter and the thing. So we actually put another inverter on there. They originally only quoted 3. We decided to go to a 4th because we wanted extra capacity there. So that's just a little difference there between the AC capacity of the inverter and the DC capacity of the array.
And your second question was in regards to maintenance costs, correct? So at this point, I don't think we're anticipating a great deal of maintenance costs as far as, because there's really, and I know Greg had spoken to this, I think, at the informational session. Most of it ends up taking care of itself as far as it washes off in the rain, most of the things coming through. The main maintenance cost would come from if there was something to break, if an inverter goes down or if a panel somehow gets damaged, something like that. Primarily, most of that will be covered by the warranty of those particular products. Now, once you get outside the warranty, that would be something we would take on, so that's not built into these particular costs, but we'd have to look at that. Is that, okay. I'll get Dylan first. Go ahead, Dylan. That's all right. That's all right.
We currently heat with gas, right?
Heating for the kitchen and for heating in general? Yeah. I believe that's correct, yeah.
Has there been any thought given to going forward, since we're kind of getting into the electric business, of switching over to heat pumps?
That wasn't part of the project. I'll repeat the question, sorry. Delvin's question was, has there been considered, since we're using gas currently for heating and for some of the kitchen, things like that, has there been consideration of moving over to full electric or doing more electric than that? That was not part of this project. It's an interesting idea. I will say a question had come up last week of can we add on to the system, and the answer to that is yes. So under either method, there is more room on the roof to add panels, not a ton of extra, but more. The ground mount has plenty of space if we wanted to add out there. And I know another question was asked last week of if we did the rooftop, could we still add on to the ground? And the answer to that is also yes, if we wanted to do that later on. So the ability to increase our production would be there if we wanted to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, the roof, the shingle, the metal, is that the shingle too, or is that along sheets?
I think it's sheets, but for the roofing. So repeating the question, referring to the roofing costs here noted at the bottom of this slide. Question is for the metal, is that a metal shingle or is that sheets? Is that your question?
No, it's a standing seam panel. That's a standing seam panel, as their mounting method on the standing seam panel is to put it on the ribs. They said they don't really recommend the shingles for putting it on there because then you got to penetrate the shingle just like you do on a normal shingle. So that was one of the advantages of the metal roof, is that they actually got clamps that don't ever penetrate the roof compared to the shingle roof, which is drilled into the rafters.
Yep. Larry.
Just a follow-up question to that point. As I was looking through the quote, two of the concerns I have with a roof mount, number one is the aesthetics, because they have to be on the front side of the better if we could put them on the backside, I understand we can. But number two was penetrations through a roof mount, which we all know what happened when we had a flat roof, or we had a lot of issues with water leaking in the church. And we put a slope roof on it to take care of that. So I don't really like to get back to where we're doing penetrations. I understand that the metal roof is a better way to put these panels on because, as Carl said, you don't have penetrations. But if you look at, okay, the metal roof is about 17,000 more than a shingle roof. So really that puts your ground mount cost, if you add that 17,000 difference between shingles and metal roof, your costs are basically the same between the ground mount or the roof mount. Is that a safe, kind of a safe math that I did?
I'd have to think about that. Carl's probably looked at that too. I'll repeat the question real quick for online. So a couple comments. This was from Larry. Comments first was on the aesthetics of having the roof mount, which I don't know if it's a question, just kind of a statement there. The second piece was regarding to piercing the roof. So between the two costs of the roof replacement, the shingles cost is about $17,000 lower. He brought up the concern of whether there will be piercing on a regular shingle roof and whether that'll cause leakage, things like that. And so I think the point was more to probably makes more sense to do a metal roof so that you don't have that piercing. And so there's a couple things to respond to probably there. I don't know if Carl, you want to take some of this, but I know we had looked into the piercing of the roof and some of the technology they have now as far as that goes. We looked at some of that. Do you want to comment, stepping forward a little bit? But
It's hard to say without having a demonstration there, but they do have two methods of sealing, and they actually try to drill into with their brackets into the rafters themselves. So they try not to penetrate the decking alone. And the method they use is a lot similar to what they use to put the dishes on the rooftop. It's been around for years, and every one of them, even the roofing people tell me they haven't had any problem with it, except the one roofer said he had a problem because the guy was putting them on and was ending up going broke, and he didn't seal the whole thing right. And he said then that turned into a big mess, but that was the only one. He said he's not had any problem with any system that's gone on from any of the reputable people.
And then as far as the math on I'd look at the math. I'd say you're probably fairly close on that, Larry. So it's an additional $17,000 for the roof replacement. That is an additional cost that you'd have to put in play on the roof side if you went the metal route, certainly. And I think when we looked at, and when we were asking the questions about the leakage on that, all of them answered pretty much the same way, in that they didn't think there was much risk at all of that. It's pretty tried and true, I think, and not many issues have ever arisen from that as far as leakage from that. So on the regular shingle roof, on the metal for sure, because you're not piercing at all. But on the other, they've got that, whatever that methodology is, that avoids that problem. Russ?
Just comment, you're probably getting more longevity out of the metal roof.
Russ's comment was that you're probably getting more longevity out of the metal roof as opposed to the shingle roof as well, so that's another consideration.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, but oddly enough, the warranty on the shingles is as long as the warranty on the metal roof. So the warranty, what you say, it looks to me to be wrong, but the warranties are basically the same on both the metal roof and the shingles, so.
So on the rooftop, the concern that I've got is weight. And that building was not designed originally for a roof of this style, and then we're adding more. So are they going to have an engineer actually certify that it is able to, or is it just, oh yeah, that should be fine? Because I've been in the construction world a lot where, yeah, you think you know, but
Yeah, I'll repeat that real quick and I'll let Carl respond. Hold on, Carl.
I've had a couple guys,
I'm gonna repeat it for online first. So the concern was brought up about the weight of the roof and how much work has been done there if we do rooftop solar. The question is, are they going to have an engineer come out and check that ahead of time? It's gonna be adding additional weight to the roof. We'll be able to handle the pressure of that, given that the roof was not originally designed with that in mind, and it wasn't the original roof as well. Does that about sum it up? All right, good, Carl.
Well, I have had 2 structural guys look at it already. Of course, I asked them for opinions, and they said, well, you want me to stamp it? No, I'm not gonna stamp it, but here's our opinion. And both of them, basically, it's another 5 pounds a square foot. And they said, when you look at the wind loading, which is 20 pounds, I think 20 pounds a square foot, and the snow loading is 10 pounds a square foot, that they would basically say that was negligible. Then when he'd asked me a question about loading on the wall, and I just ran some quick numbers on what that would be, and looking at it pretty conservatively, it only adds about 200 pounds to each truss at the building where it sits on the building. So each truss will only end up with about 200 pound loading, more than what it's got. And I think typically they look at a live loading for like people walking on the roof is like 20 pounds a square foot or more. So, they should be good for that, but we can have a guy look at it and stamp it if we need to, but that'll cost money.
Yeah, I'd follow up with that too, and that's not, obviously, like the cost of a separate engineer or something looking at that piece is not built into this. I would say if that is a concern, I think we can definitely add that to that piece of it. It's something we could do. If we find that it's not tenable at that point, then that's something we'll bring back.
The
Bob?
concern, I guess I'm looking at it from a different perspective of if there's a problem liability-wise, let's just say theoretically there is something that causes a catastrophic failure. We have a slight earthquake, and we already added, and then we already added again. Now, who is responsible for paying to repair the hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage? And that's kind of why I have large concerns of not having an engineered stamped drawing.
Yep, no, that's a good point, and I'll repeat that too as for online. A large part of the concern relates to if something were to happen later down the line, who's the liability cover for that, whether that's the roofing contractor, whether that's the solar, where that falls. And I'll say, just in response to that, I don't know that it's really clear to us at this point where that would be, especially if we do replace the roof again. I'm assuming we're adding another party in there that would probably be a part of that. So that is probably something we'd have to check and see where that is. I'll reiterate too, I do think it's a good idea to have an engineer come out and take a look at that. I'd say that's something we'd probably tack onto that as part of this. I don't think the contractors, I don't think that was their intention to have a separate engineer, somebody come out and check that. But that is something we could have tacked onto that and see what that would be.
If I remember correctly, it seems like last time we talked about this, you said that the metal roof was actually lighter weight than the shingle roof, which would offset the weight of the solar panels.
So I'll repeat that too. The comment was, and I think this was last week we mentioned this, the metal roof is actually lighter than the shingle roof, as it turns out. That could offset, maybe I shouldn't say that, I'll let Carl respond to that, but it would be lighter than the shingle roof, that's correct. Maybe Carl can respond, would that offset potentially some of that weight distribution, or is that something you've looked at? Just a little bit. It probably wouldn't be a massive impact, but it would make a difference, I would say. Any other questions?
If our current wattage now is 50,000, where are we only going with like 30.2?
The 50,202 is what you're referring to, and that's the yearly output. I think, and I'll let Carl answer that because I know he built that in. So she's asking about the fact that we've got 50,202, I think, on our wattage for the year. I think it has to do with the timing, but I'll let them.
Yeah, I mean, the kilowatt hours, that's actually from our past 12 months of the church and the parsonage. That's what we used, was 50,000 kilowatt hours for the year. So
I I think it's probably more comparable to the 47,687 on those sheets of what's gonna be produced on an annual basis. So I think that's the apples to apples comparison there. So I think we're right under what we had before, which matches up to the amount of panels and things. I apologize, I don't think I repeated that question for online. Sorry, online.
Yeah, how much difference is it for rooftop to the ground as far as insurance?
So that, it is going to be more, and we talked about this question last week too. When we looked at the question relates to insurance between the roof mount and the ground mount. So the rooftop is probably going to be a negligible change in the amount of insurance coverage. It'll be part of the building. There would be an increase, but it would already be part of our existing policy for what's covered on the building. For liability, it's covered. For ground mount, it would be a separate policy that would be increased. We don't have quotes yet on what that would be. It would be more than the roof mount option, but I don't have an exact number for you, Bill. Terry?
Make a motion, we go ahead.
To the vote? Okay. And we were setting this up, so Terry's got a motion to move forward with the recommendation from the committee. I will say too, our structure that we want to do it in is we're going to put out ballots and everybody's going to write on them and return them in. We'll have that 2 votes. But can I modify that to a motion to move forward to the voting process? Are we ready for that? Okay, any seconds? Michelle? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and move forward to that. I don't know if we need ayes for that. Any final questions before we do that? Okay, so we're going to pass it out. All right, we'll wait for online. Sorry.
Just a quick question as far as passing out. Will we be able to discuss if it goes forward, which option we would like, or is it once we're doing this, you know, I just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity. So if right now we're just voting to whether we want to do it, and then
whether we want to do solar or not. So the way this vote is structured, there will be 2 votes. There will be the first vote to move forward with solar or not. The second vote will be whether we move forward with roof mount or ground mount. And we structured it that way because we didn't want somebody who didn't want solar to have to not have a choice on if we were doing it, which one they'd like to do. So there'll be 2 votes. First one is yes or no. If we say no, we're done. But if we say yes, we'll have the choice of which way to go.
Patrick,
Yes.
how close, like you're talking about down by the cemetery, how close are you talking about it to the cemetery?
So
Would it be on the same ground? There are graves that aren't marked down there.
Yeah, there's a lot of space. There's a lot of space down there. We don't need a lot for this actually, comparatively. So we have the option to move it kind of as far and as close as we want. We also have space, like we have depth and we have width down there. There's a lot of space. So we would keep it further away from the cemetery. I believe it's going to be closer. I think to right now where they put it was closer to the ball field. I think, but we also have space to back away from that too. Primary concerns are keeping it away from the road, for one thing, so that nothing comes off the road and hits them or damages them in any way. But we are structuring it to be as far away from the cemetery essentially as possible, so it's closer to the ball field as opposed to being close to the cemetery. I think that'd be accurate to say.
This isn't over the grave.
Correct, yeah, we're not gonna be shading the graves with solar panels or anything like that, yeah, it'll be.
Some that don't have stone down.
Yeah, we're keeping them away from the cemetery. That'll definitely be part of the consideration for that. Yes. I think we've determined we don't need to have a fence around it. With the size of our installation will be low enough we don't have to have a fence. We do, however, have to get permission from the neighbors to set it up because it's close enough to property lines, but a fence is not required. I don't think there's anything too crazy with the size of our installation. It's not, a lot of Posey County ordinances we avoid with that. Okay, there is a question online that I'll cover real quick. The question was, will there be an increased risk of fire? I'll let Carl answer that. I think the answer is no. Specifically from the panel system itself, no. Possibly the inverters, but I'll let Carl answer that question before we go here.
Yeah, I mean, just offhand, I'd say no, there's not a bigger risk of fire way it'll be set up, I mean, you'll have some, wiring run on top, or it'll be in conduit and all that, and it's, rated for outdoors, so, you know, that, I would basically say, no, there wouldn't be any more, problem with fire hazard.
Patrick, you may want to repeat what the vote is.
Yes, okay, and for online or just in general? Okay,
Yeah, just in
so once everybody's got it, I will repeat, this first vote is a vote on whether to proceed with solar, and regardless of ground or roof, whether as a congregation we would like to proceed with a solar project. That is the first vote. Yes, yes or no. It is a yes or no. Yes is proceed, no, sorry, I will clarify. So if you vote yes, you're saying yes, proceed with the solar project. If you vote no, you're saying no, do not proceed with the solar project. And on this first vote. Thank you, guys. And online, are we just doing that in the chat? So, okay, online will be through the chat, so we'll give them a minute as well. Carol, Joe, you want to play us any background music while we wait on the count? Be right back. We have our online count. I'm going to go give it to those guys. The results are in. All right, from our counted votes, we have 82 yes, 10 no, and 2 abstain. So we'll move forward with the solar project. All right, we're passing out the second round of votes, which will be rooftop versus ground mount. At this time, I'll open it up to additional questions, having changed. Any other questions before we move on to this vote? JJ? It's a good question. Let's try and decide whether we should do it. Let me ask real quick. Thoughts from the committee?
We can, I mean, it's
I think it's-
presumption to roof would go.
Yeah. Okay, well, we can do that. Yeah, we do need to take a motion. So if you want a motion to do that, to modify the vote to be a 3-tier structure, I guess that would still function if we have a 3-tiered structure. Okay, so, all right, give me the motion, Gabe. What's our motion? Okay, that's a motion. Does anybody second the motion for 3-tier vote? All right, we got several seconds. We'll put Adam Kendall down. All right. All right. Before we move forward with that, I am hearing a lot of no's. Comments? So the motion is currently for this vote to be 3 options, which would be rooftop shingles, rooftop metal, and the ground mount option. That is the motion on the table. Please raise your hand if that's an aye. Anybody in support of that? Okay, raise your hand if that's a no. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
My question is, if we do it that way, the 3-tier, it splits the vote of the rooftop. So
Yeah.
some people probably have no preference, they prefer rooftop, whereas some would say,
So,
put it one way or the other.
yeah, that was my concern. That's why I thought about it before. So let me rephrase this. This vote, let's retain the original vote structure for rooftop versus ground mount. Subsequent to that, this just gives us the go-ahead to move forward with the option. As far as details, we can put it out later as far as which way we think is best, and we can kind of put it further informational sessions and things if we want to, decide between those two. For now, let's stick with just the vote between the roof mount and ground mount. So we'll continue, this will still continue to be a vote for roof mount and ground mount. Didn't get a lot of support for your motion, I'm afraid, Gabe, but, so we'll go that. After the fact, if we decide to go the roof option, which, again, we have no idea if that's the way we do go, we will further break that down. I guess we could do a third vote if we really wanted to. Okay, all right. I will entertain that motion. Questions in the back? Yes.
I have a question on this, rebate.
Yes.
Is that for sure written in stone with the election coming up?
That is current law. If the election changes, they could change that later down the line. That is currently written in stone for the next 10 years. So it is the current law.
because I didn't wanna
Mhm.
get into this and then say, election day.
It's,
Things, and it's not.
there is always a risk. Now, I will put to that, I believe the time they said it would take to install would be 6 weeks. Is that correct? I think it was 6 weeks. So from the time we decide, pull the fund, and obviously there's time in there. So the risk being if we decide to do this and they change the law on us, and we no longer have the rebate available, that is a possibility. Right now, that is not the current law. So it would have to take an act of Congress, literally an act of Congress, to change that and to remove that. But that could happen. All right, so I would propose we do, I know it sounds crazy, maybe we do a third tier structure. If rooftop prevails, we move to a third vote between roof shingles and roof metal. Any questions on that, comments? No motions, we're gonna move forward with just this vote. Go ahead.
What would be the difference in, metal shingles as opposed to metal sheeting?
Metal shingles as opposed to sheeting. I think that was answered by Carl. Is that a cost question? Is that a question for the cost or just general structure between shingles and sheeting? Cost structure, do you have that answered on? Between metal shingles and metal sheeting?
Oh, no, the guy wouldn't even give me a quote on metal shingles.
Yes, they would have to have penetration. Yeah, the standing seam's whole purpose is to support without penetration.
All right. How about this? I think we proceed with the vote on rooftop versus ground mount now. We'll see where we are from there. Okay. All right. So the vote currently on the line is, we're gonna say right ground for ground mount, roof for roof mount. Okay, that is the current vote on the table. Stacy?
Can we get a second on that motion, just like?
All motions failed at that point, so we continue with the original plan. We'll see where we land from here. Ain't democracy great, folks? I love it. There's a question online about glare. Is that directed toward roof or ground? Okay, question regarding glare from the roof mount. I believe from the angle, I don't think that's an issue. I'll ask Carl thoughts on that as well. Based on the location of the issue, I think it's all directed in such a way that there would not be a glare, especially the fact we're heading that direction. I don't believe that is an issue. Go ahead, Stacy.
They're engineered to absorb. That's how they generate electricity.
Engineered to what, sorry?
To absorb.
Okay. Stacy's answer to the glare question, they are engineered to absorb the light rather than causing a glare, so there should not be issues from glare. We need something, Greg, some kind of music. Jeopardy music, something. All right, I have the final results. There's no need for third vote. It was 56 ground, 38 roof. So we're gonna proceed with the ground mount option. All right. I think that's that. No more voting. All right, we have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Bob's not here. I can't run this meeting. No, all right. Second, is that what I'm seeing? All right, second. All in favor, say aye. All right. Thank you guys very much. Yeah, sorry, Bob. I closed without you.
I was sidetracked.